گرامیداشت شهیدان قتل عام اشرف در واشینگتن، سخنرانیهای شخصیتهای سیاسی و دانشگاهی و فرماندهان آمریکایی حفاظت از اشرفی‌ها، 14 سپتامبر 2013، 23 شهریور 92. سخنان تامریج، اولین وزیر امنیت آمریکا: ما در اینجا گرد هم آمده ایم تا از 52 شهید تجلیل کنیم. مالکی: اگر تو و برادر شریرت ولی فقیه رژیم ایران خوب فکر کنید، خواهید دید که شما آتش این ایده را از بین نبرده اید، بلکه آن را سوزانتر کرده اید. حتی یک دقیقه هم خیال نکن که مرگ آنها شعله ها را خاموش خواهد کرد. بعد از اینکه تقریباً 2 تریلیون دلار خرج شده و 4500 آمریکایی جان خود را از دست دادند، بزرگترین شریک آمریکا در منطقه رژیم مالکی است که از نظر اخلاقی فاسد و ورشکسته است و انتخاب کرده در کنار ابلیسی مثل ولی فقیه رژیم ایران قرار گیرد. کشور آمریکا باید بخشی از مسئولیت این امر را بپذیرد. نمیتوان فقط رژیم ایران و عراق و سازمان ملل را مسئول دانست. حضور دائمی نیروهای کلاه‌آبی سازمان ملل در لیبرتی ضروری است و ما خواستار تیوال‌های حفاظتی، جلیقه‌های ضد گلوله و کلاهخودها هستیم. ما مکرراً از دولت آمریکا می‌خواهیم آنچه را که صحیح است انجام دهد و ما صدایمان را هر چه می‌توانیم بلندتر خواهیم کرد. وقتی در آمریکا تعهد یا قولی می‌دهیم، باید به آن وفادار بمانیم. بسیاری از ما تعهد را از پشت تلفن شنیدیم و به خانم رجوی منتقل کردیم و ما از آنها خواستیم که به آمریکا اعتماد کنند. شرم بر همه.
I must tell you, your American friends feel as responsible for the death of these individuals as anybody else because we told them, trust America. Shame on every one of them.
Samsami. I am the U.S. representative of National Council of Resistance of Iran. Welcome you all here. 25 years after the mass murder of 30,000 political dissidents and MEK members, which took place in infamous prisons across Iran in 1988 at the hands of the clerical regime, today we bear witness to the massacre of 52 of the brightest and most courageous children of Iran by the same criminals and their puppet government in Iraq. The extrajudicial executions at Ashraf were undoubtedly instances of crime against humanity, about which we must never be silent. I'd like to point out every single one of these men and women, as well as the 7 residents kidnapped, carried identity cards issued by the U.S. government, declaring them as protected persons under the Geneva Conventions. Second, every single one of these residents had signed an agreement with the U.S. government which stipulated that in exchange for consolidation of their weapons, the U.S. government would bear the responsibility for their protection. The United States deprived them of their means of self-defense, leaving them unprotected against the Iranian regime's criminals and agents which Tehran had installed in Iraq. So, my question is, when bullets were flying at Ashraf, where was the U.S. government? Where was the U.S. embassy? Where was the United Nations? Where was the UNHCR? Why has the U.S. government broken its promise of protection and ignored repeated warnings about an impending attack? The United States, the United Nations bear clear and defined moral and legal responsibility for these deaths. In aftermath of this crime, why have the Secretary of State and the President remained silent? Why no clear warnings being sent to Iraq? Why there is no specific measures taken to prevent the continuation of this catastrophe? Why is the United States refusing to take measures so that UN Blue Helmet forces take responsibility of protecting the residents? Why isn't acting to ensure the requirements for protection and liberty? Why hasn't pressured Iraq to allow T-walls, helmets, bulletproof vests into liberty? We want those responsible for crime against humanity to be brought to justice. The United States must take effective measures to ensure the immediate release of the 7 kidnapped. We seek the formation of an international fact-finding mission and demand comprehensive and impartial investigations. Owing it to its direct role in the crime, the Iraqi government cannot be trusted. September 1st will reserve its place in Iranian history. Let us learn from the fallen heroes in اشرف. They planted seed of hope in the minds and hearts of millions of Iranian youth, men and women, exemplifying deniable courage and sacrifice, without which the search for freedom would be in vain. Their ultimate sacrifice will undoubtedly inspire more Iranians to rise up and overthrow the Iranian government. Thank you and welcome again.
I'm going to start with a story that'll lighten the mood a little bit. When I was young, the thought of being inside a tank excited me so much that I would badger my father every day to take me to go see one. Every day he said no. I was 3 or 4, shortly before I departed Camp Ashraf to the United States, when he decided to take me for a walk. And he would tell jokes to keep the mood warm, because as I know now, those few days were our last days together. On September 1st, 2013, Iraqi forces and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Quds forces staged a massacre on the residents of Camp Ashraf, killing 52 unarmed, innocent, legally protected civilians, including my father, Ali Asghar Emadi. My name is Amir Masood Emadi. I stand here speaking not just to you, but to several different audiences, each deserving a different message about the massacre in Camp Ashraf. First, I speak to my mother, my aunts, my uncles, and cousins in Camp Liberty. Second, to the U.S. government. Third, to my countrymen and women in Iran. And finally, I will speak to my American friends. But before I begin, I'd like to express my deepest condolences to Mrs. Maryam Rajavi and the leadership of the Iranian resistance. You know, at times like these, in the MEK, you don't necessarily say condolences, you say congratulations, because this is a victory against the Iranian regime. But I know how heartbroken you must be. And my heart is with you. So to my family in Camp Liberty, in particular, my mother, Fatima Nabavi, Mom, since we last talked a few months ago, I got my master's. I got an MBA in global management, and it's ironic because at times like these, it's a bit difficult to manage myself. But I've dropped everything in my life, and I've dedicated every minute of my time to uphold my father's dignity and ideals. My father didn't die in vain. It was a betrayed promise that got him murdered. And my responsibility is to ensure your protection and those around you. And I will do my utmost. We are humbled by your perseverance and commitment. That is why the mullahs are so afraid of you. And we are proud of your leadership for regime change in Iran. And we bow our heads to your sacrifice. To the United States government, my father trusted you. He disarmed for you. You made him vulnerable. When he sent me away to America, only days before the Persian Gulf War, the first one in 1991, he did so to keep me safe and secure. And when he left me on September 1st, his good reason was his valor and his conviction to the cause of freedom, which coincides with your values. But when you left him, you didn't leave him with safety or security. You didn't leave him because it was honorable. You knew Maliki was under the thumb of the Iranian regime, where he fled to seek refuge. And you knew Maliki would unleash his wolves on my father and his friends. To the Iranian people, including my relatives, protesting in the streets and imprisoned for being part of the same movement that my father died for, the MEK. We're fighting for our future, and I have no doubt that together we could bring that positive change that we seek. And finally, to my American friends, in particular to those on this panel, with every beat of my heart, I am sincerely grateful for all your support. And I admire stalwart public servants such as Secretary Ridge, Director Woolsey, looking for you. Here. Director Woolsey, Ambassador Reese, Joseph, Mr. Sano, Professor Hughes, and American warriors, Colonel Martin, Colonel Cantwell, and many others. What happened in اشرف, that was foreseeable. What happened in اشرف was foreseeable. In fact, we warned about it. What happened then can happen again. But with your support, we can prevent it. To conclude, as I stand here honored by your support and the support of our esteemed speakers, I repeat that the United States is legally and morally responsible for the safety and the security of the residents of Camp Liberty. They can foresee attacks, and they can never justify Maliki's actions, especially after the recent lies of detaining the 7 hostages. We don't want to see any more deaths. The deaths of over 100 Ashrafis since the killing started in 2009 was enough My dad's death was enough. Now I just pray that I would one day live up to his ideals, morals, and conviction. I pray he's looking down, saying, "That's my boy." I wish that one day I can be so courageous that if necessary, giving my life so that millions of other people are going to live in freedom would be a sudden byproduct of the life I choose to lead. I have one more message. This one is to Obama. One question for you. When will America's written commitments mean something? If you want to stop Malachi's killing against the unarmed residents of Camp Liberty, you know what to do. Keep your damn promise. Keep your promise.
Good morning. My name is Mitchell Reese. Amir, I know I speak for everybody in this room and who's watching that I'm sure your father is very, very proud of you. We've come together here today in Washington and around the world to grieve, to mourn the loss of 52 brave souls, fathers and mothers, daughters and sons, sisters and brothers who were murdered in cold blood just a few days ago. We're also here to show our solidarity and to honor their memory. And so I'd like to ask all of you to rise and join with me for a minute of clapping in their honor. We know that that sound will be heard not just a few blocks away in the White House, but also in Baghdad and one day soon we hope, in Tehran. We also come together today to show our concern for the 7 who have been kidnapped and whose fate is still uncertain. We come together today to share our anger at those responsible for perpetrating these despicable crimes, and to share our frustration at all those who have stood by and done nothing to prevent them. We come together today to call once more for action. Not just words, but deeds are needed. We demand action by the White House, by the State Department, by UNAMI to deploy blue helmets to Camp Liberty immediately, to our friends in Europe, and to legislators in Congress to threaten real consequences in our bilateral relations unless the Maliki government takes immediate action to protect those who remain at Camp Liberty.
Amir, we're all very touched by your passion, your love, and your courage. and you said you wanted to grow up just like your dad. I think you already have. Your mother is very proud. There was a 17th century poet, an English poet by the name of John Donne, and he once said that the death of any man diminishes me because I'm involved in mankind. We gather to commemorate 52 martyrs, but we know that there are so many, even thousands, that have gone before them. And unless the United States government and the United Nations keep their promises, sadly there'll be more. So we gather today. It's a memorial service, and appropriately, with the reverence and the thoughtfulness that accompany these services. But we also gather to remind ourselves and to remind our government of the promises that it's made and that have been unkept. You know, it's really rather remarkable what those of us, and Amir, you were so kind to refer to your American friends. You have a lot more American friends than those who are in this room, but we've had to endure, but nothing like the men and women at Ashraf and Liberty have had to endure. But what we've had to endure is relevant and worthy of just public, not only discussion, but condemnation. Promises have been made, they've been unkept, so they're worthless. We've listened to a lot of rhetoric from the UN and the United States, and it's meaningless to date. So at the end of the day, when we see what's happened, I must say, and I speak for myself, but I dare say rarely do I speak for any other American, but I do think that all of us have been involved from the get-go are ashamed of our country. And to say that we are embarrassed by its actions is just not enough. We're hurt by their actions, not the hurt that the family and friends of those who died feel, but we're hurt. Because all of us who've been joined in this cause with the MEK have spent a significant part of our lifetimes serving our government. And unfortunately, after nearly $2 trillion and 4,500 lives, American lives, we find that their greatest ally in the region is a morally corrupt, bankrupt Maliki who has chosen to side with the devil, the supreme leader. We bear some of the responsibility in this country, though. We can't just put it on Iran, and we cannot put it on Iraq, and we just cannot put it on the UN, although they've proven to be ineffective and feckless. And I would say disingenuous is kind, but I think they actually lied to Madame Rajavi, they lied to the residents of Ashraf and Liberty, and they continue to lie to this day, and they have been indifferent to the plight of these patriots. So we're going to call on the American government to do what's right again and again and again. If nothing else, we will be persistent, we will be vocal. We will be as loud as we possibly can be. We will gather and protest. We will gather in plea to simply say to America, you are the idea. The idea of America is when you make, one of the other ideas that is so similar to our existence is we make a commitment, we keep it. We made a commitment. By the way, we made it several times since every resident got a piece of paper. Secretary Clinton made it. Dan Freed made it. It's made in writing. Many of us heard it over the phone. We communicated it to Madame Rajavi. She communicated and persuaded the people to Ashraf and Liberty. I must tell you, your American friends feel as responsible for the death of these individuals as anybody else because we told them, trust America. Shame on every one of them. The deceit, the deception is unconscionable, It's immoral and it's un-American. And while we condemn the past, and we'll continue to do that, that does not do us any good if we think about the future. And what we need in the future is we need a permanent UN blue-helmeted presence at Camp Liberty. Now, we need the protective T-walls, we need the vests, we need the helmets. And you notice they had vests and helmets there when the mercenaries come in, when the political assassins come in. The vests and the helmets and the T-walls won't do any good unless the United States and the United Nations put somebodies in there who represent the UN and the United States to make sure that another massacre, and it was a massacre. So we pay tribute to the fallen. May they rest in peace. They will not, and they have not died in vain, Amir. They have not died in vain. Their cause will prevail. It is righteous, and in time they will prevail. Some of you have heard me refer to Benazir Bhutto before, but I can't help but do it again, and I'll continue until we're together in Tehran. But she said a long time ago, actually it was in a speech, and not a speech that I saw, but I visited with her about a year before she was assassinated. But she said something that I think you believe, and the people of Liberty and Ashraf have believed. She said, you can exile a man, but not an idea. You can imprison a man, but not an idea. You can kill a man, but not an idea. To Maliki and the mullahs, heed carefully. Your brutal, immoral assault on innocent, defenseless people will not extinguish the dream that they shared. It will not extinguish the dream that their family and friends and the residents of Camp Liberty share. It will not extinguish the dream and the idea that all Iranians living under your suppressive rule share. The dream of a free and open and democratic Iran. And if you think about it, Mr. Maliki and your evil brethren, the supreme leader, you haven't doused the flame of the idea, you've added fuel to it. Because upon their deaths, the dream grows stronger, the commitment grows stronger, and don't think for 1 minute that their deaths will extinguish the flame, eliminate the hope, or change their idea, commitment to the idea that yearns in their heart and in their head and the cause for which they died. I have many ancestors in my past. And my father wanted to be an Irishman, and he was part Irish, but there's an Irish limerick, an Irish saying that I like to share with you. Death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. They won't steal the memory, Amir, of all of us, of your father and his friends. And they will never steal the idea and the righteous cause to which he gave his life, a free Iran. Thank you.
The United States since then generally been the sheriff, sometimes under the rubric of the United Nations, sometimes, as when Bill Clinton went into Kosovo with air attacks without authorization either from the American Congress or from the United Nations. But generally speaking, we have assumed that role, not always wisely. And Churchill said of us that the Americans always do the right thing, but unfortunately, it is usually only after they have exhausted all other possibilities. But once we do make a call, as we did for all practical purposes with the situation stemming from Iraq and Iran and pointedly involving the MEK, what we can't do is pull out silently and cravenly. We have a very serious problem now in that the world has seen us, and I'm afraid accurately so, as throwing our badge in the dirt before we get the job done. Now, why should it be our job? To protect Ashraf, to deal with the Iranians, to deal with the Iraqis. Can't somebody else do it? No, not really, no. If there is going to be an effective move to do what needs to be done in that part of the world with respect to the terrible governments of Syria, Iran, Iraq, and the murderous activities of the Iranian mullahs and those who work for them, we are going to have to do it. There is no out. Now, I want to close particularly with a thought to Amir and those who, like him, have lost loved ones and relatives and friends in the terrible events of September 1st. It's a statement, not quite a poem, just a statement, I guess, attributed to Victor Hugo. It's called Gone From My Sight. I'm standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the moving breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She's an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch her until at length she hangs like a speck of white cloud just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, "There, she's gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight. That's all. She's just as large in mast, in hull, and spar as she was when she left my side, and she's just as able to bear her load of living freight to her destined port. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone says, "There, she's gone," there are other eyes watching her coming, and other voices ready to take up the glad shout. "Here she comes!" Thank you.
Greetings to friends who believe in dignity, freedom, and democracy. My heart is heavy today. We're here to remember 52 men and women who lived for the freedom of Iran. They dedicated their lives to freeing their homeland from religious dictatorship, cruelty, and persecution. We're here to bear witness to their murders carried out by Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's militia on the orders of Iran's supreme religious leader, Ali Khamenei. We are here to insist that the United States and the United Nations keep their promises to protect the remaining 3,000 people kept imprisoned at Camp Liberty. I must point out that Liberty is the name U.S. gave this camp. Now it is a prison and death camp for Iranian freedom fighters. As an American, I am deeply embarrassed and, as Tom Ridge said, ashamed that the United States is so negligent in providing or ensuring the protection they promised. We must demand the release of the 6 women and 1 man who were kidnapped from Camp Ashraf. Maliki must be held responsible for their return. The leaders of the Iranian regime and the Revolutionary Guards must be charged with crimes against humanity in the International Criminal Court for the massacre of these 52 men and women, and for the murder of unarmed people in previous attacks on Camp Liberty and Ashraf, and for the political assassinations they have carried out around the world since the 1980s, and for the murder of 30,000 political prisoners 25 years ago. Of the 52 people murdered on September 1st, many were leaders. 9 of the men were commanders of the National Liberation Army and political prisoners during the rule of Ayatollah Khomeini. 6 of the women were members of the Mujahideen's Leadership Council, all of them former political prisoners in Iran. I want to take a moment to make a special remembrance of Zareh Ghahami, the Deputy Secretary General of the Mujahideen. She was the leader of Camp Ashraf on the day of the massacre. Zareh Ghahami was one of the women of the resistance that was determined to end the oppression of women in Iran. I'll quote from Marianne Rajavi's speech for International Women's Day 2001. The name of the talk was The Price of Freedom. A woman achieves her rights. The first step is to believe that we can. One can and must struggle to become free and free others. This is the serious reality and the spirit that runs through the veins of this resistance and all its men and women. But we must never forget that there is a price to pay for freedom. These 52 men and women of the Iranian resistance are gone. And thousands of other freedom-loving Iranians are gone, killed by the rule of the supreme religious leader. But you can't kill the dream of freedom. The vision for a free Iran lives on. These 52 women and men showed the world, and in particular, the millions of young people in Iran, that it is possible to live with a life of dignity, freedom, and courage. The vision will live on until it is achieved.
Mitchell, thank you very much, and good afternoon. This has already been a very moving event, and it's certainly a privilege and an honor for me to be here and to join with others in expressing my deepest sorrow and sympathy to Amir, to Madame Rajavi, to all of the families and all of the friends of the victims of the September 1st massacre at Camp Ashraf. To the mothers, the fathers, the sons, the daughters, the sisters, the brothers who have lost those dear to you, you have my sincerest condolences. So today we pay homage to the victims, to these heroes, and we acknowledge their valiant sacrifices for a free and democratic Iran. The 52 martyrs who perished in this most recent travesty have now joined thousands of others who have given their lives to advance the same noble cause. Their sacrifices must never be forgotten and will not be forgotten. These were unarmed, defenseless civilians under U.S. and UN protection. Those responsible for this crime against humanity must be hunted down and must be punished. And in doing so, the mullah's regime, its many crimes and subterfuges, must be exposed for what it is, a criminal enterprise that must be overthrown and extinguished. We We must also demand the immediate release of the 7 hostages who have been taken prisoner by Iraqi security forces and whose forced return to Iran will mean certain torture and death. Iraq's Ministry of Human Rights, and just think of the irony of the source, Iraq's Ministry of Human Rights has announced that these 7 have been arrested and are being incarcerated because they, the unarmed hostages, attacked the heavily armed security forces. This is the cynicism of the big lie, a lie so preposterous and so devoid of truth and compassion that it carries us back to the days and to the Nazi era. To punishing the perpetrators and securing the release of the 7 captives, we must also look forward. We must demand that Iraq allow the necessary measures required to protect the MEK members remaining in Iraq at Camp Liberty from future attack. This includes the installation of the T-walls and the provisioning of individual protective gear and medical response capabilities. Most important, UN monitors must be stationed inside the camp to deter the next assault. This deployment of blue helmets must be done on an urgent basis. It must be done now. For our policy in Iraq, we must begin with the acknowledgement that the Maliki government is no friend, but rather a subsidiary of the mullahs in Tehran. For Iran, the lesson of 1 September is clear. The June election did not bring about change, but has only emboldened the criminals of the IRGC and of the other instruments of state repression. Following the pipe dream that Rouhani will prove to be a reformer will only lead to our worst nightmare, a nuclear-armed extremist theocracy determined to expand its authority and its influence through the overthrow of American friends, allies, interests, and most importantly, our values. Instead of relieving the sanctions on the regime in anticipation, or more accurately, the hope for constructive engagement on the nuclear program, we must recognize the evil that is the Iranian regime. If we concede, if we pretend, if we self-delude, if we fail to remove the stain on the honor of America that is the September 1st massacre, we will not only fail to stop the nuclear program, but we will encourage and we will facilitate more repression in Iran, more brutality in Iraq, and more aggression in the region and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Amir, I apologize. This is not what the American officers and the American warriors ever intended to happen to your father, to our brothers and sisters at Ashraf. This is nothing short of despicable. A few hours before the attack commenced, I had done my weekly update report and sent it out. I needed some time, so I sent it out a day early. My closing comments in that week's report, my assessment, is this. Mech at Ashraf and Liberty have not fallen off Maliki's radar screen. He is fresh from a win of cutting off power to Ashraf and making UN and US bureaucrats think they scored a victory in receiving partial restoration. Credit must be given where it is due. Maliki must have learned well from his days as a street vendor in Damascus. He knows how to sell something that is either worthless or does not exist. Iranians see him as a close ally. One thing Maliki fails to remember, the retirement plan for Iraqi dictators is not very good. Maliki's turn will come. As I was hitting send to our American friends, to Struan Stevenson and Paulo Casado at European Parliament, to Scott Reid at Canadian Parliament, Malachi's forces were lining up at the gates. From the hills in northern Appalachia, I could come to this assessment. And yet, State Department, sitting behind the security of the walls in the Baghdad embassy, could not come to the same assessment. I agree, blue helmets on the ground at Liberty. Over a year ago, the United Nations posted for a security officer. After being pretty much away from my family for 10 years, I was not overly interested in doing that, but I put my name in at the United Nations and I said, I will do it. I will go over there and be the security officer, and I received the reply. Thank you for applying to the vacancy announced in the Senior Security Liaison Officer with UN Ops. We regret to inform you that you have not been selected on this occasion. We are also still waiting for the investigations concerning the 2013 rocket attacks on Camp Liberty, which left a total of 10 dead. Until the residents are brought out of Iraq, United Nations Blue Helmet security presence needs to be absent. We all have worked in or with the U.S. government, and that we know there are always solutions to those who earnestly look for them. The government of the United States has defaulted on every written agreement with the MEK.
Thank you, Madame Rajavi, members of the PMOI, NCRI, MEK, and the 52 victims of the atrocities recently perpetrated at Camp Ashraf, and the 7 that we know are currently in the hands of the secret police somewhere in Baghdad. God bless you. I want to take a minute and talk about Camp Ashraf, because I just want to touch on the humanity of the people at Camp Ashraf. I knew a number of them and spent a little less than a year there. A good friend of mine was the commander who relieved me at Camp Ashraf. He was supposed to be here today and had some travel difficulties. Colonel Chris Wilson, and I convey his condolences to all of you, as well as the condolences of Colonel Dan McElroy, another commander of Camp Ashraf. So I think most of us, that is the former commanders up there, are on the same sheet of music. In 2003, I was the first military police officer to show up at Camp Ashraf, and we were trying to understand our role. We had legal orders. The Mujahideen were on the foreign terrorist list, and we were told that they were terrorists, and we were there to, we thought, imprison them. And so my boss at the time, General Odierno, went down there and was told, well, we can't surrender because we're not at war with you. Well, it's difficult to argue that point, because you see, no American had been harmed by the Mujahideen. No American that we're aware of had even been shot at by the Mujahideen, even though he had bombed several of their camps, killed and injured several of them in the early phases of the war. So in the course of trying to develop this policy, I spent a lot of time running back and forth between Ashraf and Baghdad, to include eventually talking directly to Lieutenant General Ricardo Sanchez, who was the commander of all military forces in Iraq at the time. So General Sanchez had some ideas about what he wanted to have done, and it was my job to try to convey to him the reality of his decisions. And I said, General, you need to come up and see Camp Ashraf for yourself. So eventually he did so. Well, on the day that he arrived, he flew into my headquarters, which was actually right inside Camp Ashraf, 40 square kilometers, roughly, the grounds of the camp, huge place. And he choppered in, he and his entourage, they all disembarked, and they all had all of their combat gear, their weapons, everything. And I greeted him. I was wearing my my desert uniform. And he said, "Well, where's your protective equipment?" I said, "General, welcome to the safest place in Iraq." But I don't think he quite believed me. Anyway, we were going to take him on a tour because, as I said, it's 40 square kilometers. It's a huge place. And so we both climb into a armored Humvee, and we had a large security detail as befits his status. And we go driving down the main road in the middle of Ashraf, which is a broad boulevard, as you've seen in some of the pictures. So really, it had to be seen to be believed. It's when you get more than a kilometer from the rivers in Diyala province, it's just dirt, hot, baked dirt there. And which is why the region's crisscrossed with irrigation ditches, etc. And this camp is a city, really. Camp, for us, I don't know about you, but when I think about camp, I went there as a scout or something like that. But this is really a small city, and it had power plants, a radio station, gardens, a museum. It had a Pepsi plant, bakeries, all of these things. And it was all built out of the desert by the patience and determination of some people who had a vision for something greater than themselves. So to the earlier point, it was much more than a camp, it was an idea. And that idea, we think, is a free and democratic Iran. So I have a couple of comments. First, we've heard recapped in the very beginning by Ms. Sansami and obviously our other distinguished speakers about America's promises. I feel these acutely because as the military leader in 2003, I was the U.S. government's agent for the disarmament of the Mujahideen. And my friend Chris Wilson, whom I mentioned, personally handed at least one of the people on this poster his ID card guaranteeing his protected person's status. And so for us, of course, we, as professional military police officers, we understand the Geneva Convention, and we understood that they had a protected person status and that status continued. And in theory, that status continues regardless of whether you maintain physical control over a prisoner or not. And so we can't freely give somebody within our control to somebody else if we have reason to believe that their safety, security, health, welfare will be compromised. So I kind of have, to me, what has happened with the Mujahideen is like a much worse form of rendition than any we saw under the Bush administration. Because we're talking about over 3,000 people. We're talking about people who we knew had not committed any crime, nor even any act of aggression against the United States. And how do we know that? We know that because the FBI said so. And yet we turned them over to the government of Iraq. And so now we have, I think, 5 separate attacks that have occurred against the Mujahideen people that we guaranteed to protect. And the government of Iraq is the guarantor of their safety and security. It's simply, as Wes said and others, simply unbelievable that the government of Iraq is serious about the safety and security of the Mujahideen. It's simply unbelievable that Iraqi security forces at that camp knew nothing during the 4 hours in which, as we saw at the start of this meeting, there was protracted gunfire, measured gunfire over an extended period of time, while the men and women behind me were shot and then subsequently executed. And then the equipment was destroyed. It's unbelievable, the explanation. So similarly, I would say that it is unbelievable that we would expect the government of Iraq to conduct an investigation of this that had any meaning, any integrity whatsoever. The fact that 7 of these people are now unarmed and in the hands of these people in Baghdad as we sit here is unbelievable to me. Because, I spent two years in Iraq. I was there in 03, 05, 06, a little bit of 07, on and off. We know what these people do. And 7 of our friends are in their custody right now. I pray that we will act with honor and integrity and protect these people. Because in the end, who will protect the innocent if not we? And I share this with the people behind me on the wall. And that is, I know what it's like to be in harm's way and to commit your life. And I can tell you, going back into Iraq in 2005 and 2006 when the beheadings were going on, etc., you knew that in the end you could die. So what is left? And for me, that's my faith. They can take everything from me, including my head from my shoulders, but will never take my faith in God away. And for the Ashrafis, they have one thing more, and that is their commitment to a free, democratic, a new Iran. I think it's fitting that if you look at the poster, you see the universe behind the victims of Ashraf. Because you see, many of the stars depicted there long ago ceased to exist. But the light traveling through space keeps their presence in the universe. And so it is with the 52 on that wall, and the many others that populate the Book of Martyrs and that have died for the sake of Iran. They still exist, and their light still shines in this world. And so my prayer today is that America, that we will live to see a free, democratic Iran, that we will fulfill our promise to act quickly and secure the over 3,000 people that we promised to protect at Camp Liberty, that we will act without ceasing to free the 7 that are currently being held, and that we will accept not a government of Iraq investigation, but an international investigation that leads one day to the International Criminal Court, and that the people who morally will suffer for eternity for the deeds that they did on that black day a week ago will live to face their day in court also. Thank you very much.
First, my condolences to the families, the friends, and the continued residents in the region. It was unspeakable, obviously, and it's not just the blame going to Iraq or Iran. We, the American government, share that blame as well. And as Governor Ridge so eloquently pointed out, it's an embarrassment for us. It's not as if this was a surprise. Many members that have appeared on the dais here today have warned that this was going to happen. There have been instances of this in the past. So who are we to point fingers at? We are equally responsible. And while we may delude ourselves into thinking that we as a government have done something, in reality, actions speak louder than words. That's not the act of a traditional military force. These were cold-blooded assassins. They had pre-attack intelligence on their targets. They knew exactly who to go after. They were out to take out the leadership. Now, why were they doing this? And I think one clear example is the fact that to the Iranian regime, and Maliki I put in that same group, he is just a puppet. The MEK represents the single largest threat to the continuation of the regime in Tehran. Maliki himself has proven his true colors over the years, and to ask him to investigate atrocities that he was a full part of is totally unacceptable. And we should not dignify the conduct of an investigation by putting someone in that position who was culpable. Now, the MEK still represents the single largest threat to that continuation of their regime. And the United States and other countries in the world are being manipulated. Now, I've talked at previous conventions about the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence and Security, the MOIS, the Iranian intelligence organization / secret police. They are brutal. They are well trained. And they are merciless. Their sole objective is the perpetuation of a repressive and brutal regime. And as I and others have said many times in the past, you do not treat these type of regimes with kindness. And because America and other countries in the world would generally like to have a comprehensive resolution to conflicts to avoid going into war, and as Director Woolsey mentioned, we don't jump into those things. But how do these organizations, these countries, like Iran, how do they view that type of action on the part of the United States and other democratically elected countries? They view it simply as weakness. And you do not deal with dictatorial regimes from a position of weakness. History has proven that. The only thing that they understand, and the only thing that I know from personal experience that the MOIS understands, is strength and the potential to use force. Iran and Iraq did no such thing on the attack in Ashraf. Why? Because they want those images to get out there. They want the world to know. And why do they do this? It's because they believe that they can intimidate the MEK. But they're mistaken. This will only make the MEK stronger. This will only further encourage not just the MEK, but the entire Iranian population that it is time to move to a free and democratic Iran, to finally rise up and remove this ineffective and repressive regime. And I think as one of my predecessors said, Maliki's days are numbered, that our commitment remains resolute, and that we will do what is absolutely necessary to see this movement succeed. And if it were not for the MEK, if it were not for the brave souls that have sacrificed, and the brave souls who are still continuing to sacrifice, we in the United States would have less knowledge of what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to read something from my brother's last letter from India to my mom in 1986 after he left Iran for Pakistan and India, and then from India he joined to Mujahideen. He called me in 86 and he says, I'm going to go to Iraq and join to Mujahideen. He was the sixth member of our family who assassinated by Iranian government, and then his greatest teacher was my sister Afsana Afzalnia, which her daughter is sitting in here next to me. She's going to George Mason University for her PhD. Her mom was assassinated in 1981, and her father, a month before, died under the torture in Evin prison. She left Iran a few years ago to pursue her education in here. And then, unfortunately, another member of our family, Khahar Mujahid, Siddiqe Ibrahimpour, one of the hostages, is related to us. She was married to my cousin Ahmad Parvar, who was assassinated in 1981 in southern Khorasan in city of Birjand. And hopefully, with the help of the distinguished guest and all the effort we are doing to release them, I hope to see their freedom pretty soon. With your permission, I just go shortly in Persian. The letter of my brother Amir Hussein to my mom, just the last part of it, and hopefully they're going to traduce. It's going to be traduced for you. He says at the last of the letter to my mom, در انتها مادر عزیزم، نمیدانم که از بودن من در اینجا راضی هستید یا خیر. باعث ناراحتیتان شدم یا خوشحالی؟ اگر خوشحال باشید خوشحالم که سعادت مرا خواسته اید و اجرتان را پیش خدا زیاد کرده اید. و اگر ناراحت باشید، اگرچه ناراحتم که ناراحتتان کردم، ولی راضیم که رضایت خدای خودم و خدای مادرم را به دست آوردم و بالاخره روزی که حقایق روشن شود میدانم که به من افتخار خواهید کرد. و بالاخره این که اگر امروز 1000 تهمت گول خوردن و احساساتی شدن و شور جوانی و غیره به من بزنند، خوشحالم از این که نسل‌های بعد که داستان ما را بخوانند صدها درود و سپاس نثار ما خواهند کرد و 1000 نفرین بر کسانی که در برابر ظلم سکوت کردند و برای گذراندن زندگیشان به 1000 ذلت و خواری تن دادند. دست و روی رنج کشیده شما را از در میبوسم. امیر حسین، اول آبان 66. Thank you very much.
We will continue to mourn and to grieve those who we've lost. But we also take strength from the knowledge. This attack was born out of fear and insecurity in Tehran. Fear that the MEK represents a force to be reckoned with, a force that is a threat to the mullahs. We will specifically call for the immediate release of the 7 hostages. We will call for the immediate improvement of the security of Camp Liberty, and specifically the T-walls, the helmets, the vests, and everything else that they've been promised and yet still are denied. We will demand the immediate deployment of blue helmets, not on a temporary basis, not on an erratic basis, but on a permanent basis, until the goal is reached of permanently resettling these friends, these relatives, these loved ones outside of Iraq. And especially for my American colleagues, we will continue to work to call on President Obama and Congress to act, to stop Maliki with his designs, and to protect those people whom we have promised to protect. We will rededicate ourselves to the fight for freedom, democracy, and human rights. And above all, as many speakers have mentioned earlier today, we will rededicate ourselves to the idea. We will carry forward this idea that there is a better future for the people of Iran, a better future represented by the MEK and the ideals to which it stands for, and the ideals to which these 52 brave martyrs gave their lives for. Thank you very much.